The first thing I'd say about this is that climate change is a big and complex problem. Of course, our paths to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, potentially getting to net zero emissions by mid-century is an absolutely enormous challenge. The science is changing all the time. And this is really is going to require and has required an interdisciplinary effort. Policies are being made around the world. We need to rely not only on ex ante or projections of the types of policies that will get us potentially to net zero and cost effectively reduce emissions. We also need to true up those policies using ex post evaluation. So the way to really think about that is we need a guide. We have to understand what portfolio of policies and programs to implement. But we then, because many of these programs are completely unprecedented, new technologies are changing all the time, and of course we have human behavior at the center. We then need to follow up as policies are being implemented and programs are being rolled out and evaluate them very carefully to be able to understand, especially in this early phase with very significant investments being made, which are the most cost effective, what are their distributional impacts within the US and around the world, how are they being implemented in ways that are equitable, and so that we can refine the portfolio of policies and programs through learning over the next couple of decades. Economics is really at the center of the evaluation part. It's not the only field that is working on this, but thanks to some very significant innovations, methodological innovations over the last couple of decades, we now have the ability for the first time to rigorously and credibly develop an evidence base that can guide policy making. So the primary efficiency criteria that economists are using to evaluate climate policies currently is their cost effectiveness. Without getting too much into the weeds here, we want to be thinking about effectively the value of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in terms of avoided future damages. And we want to compare that to the level of spending on a given program. And since we have lots of different potential programs that can be implemented to increase the adoption of a whole range of technologies, change the behavior of firms, households, and individuals that are interacting with the economy, and actually restructure the global economy, we want to be comparing different types of approaches on the basis of this sort of basic cost-benefit criteria. There is an evidence base that is growing and growing very rapidly right now regarding the impacts of incentive-based programs, of market-based instruments, of nudges, as you say. What we really need to understand, though, is not just the types of programs and policies and interventions that lead to small changes in terms of, and marginal changes in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but those that lead to very large changes. However, given such a complex problem, we really have a need to go out and take an experimental approach and an experimental view here. There are going to be many policies and programs that are developed on the basis of relatively little information, because the energy transition, by definition, is going to lead us to places that are outside the sample and outside our ability to predict within our standard models. This is true for the labor market. This is true for technological innovation. This is true for understanding damages from climate change. So we do now have a suite of tools that we simply didn't have 2 decades ago. And in my view, and I think in the view of many of those who are both developing the tools and applying them, this is transformative. We can think about this as, I like to use the metaphor of the microscope in developing the microbial theory of disease. We're able to actually now implement a policy or decarbonization program and directly attribute the emissions reductions that are responsible, disentangle to that particular program, and disentangle the impacts of that particular program from lots of other trends that are simultaneously affecting emissions, greenhouse gas emissions around the world, production and consumption activities that are leading to those emissions. That is extremely powerful, because when we're able to make that direct attribution, rather than implementing a policy and then simply looking at the trends in emissions, we're able to understand what is working and what the specific magnitudes of the response are. We need to understand the magnitudes because we need to understand how close we are to achieving our targets and commitments under, for example, the Paris Climate Accord. Different countries who are acting in this space, who are making very substantial investments to reduce emissions and decarbonize their economies, absolutely have to be able to make a direct attribution between the programs that are implemented and the emissions reductions that are achieved. That we simply could not do rigorously 20 years ago. Today we can do that. One additional element here that's very, very interesting and where I see a lot of potential is between the relationship between measurement tools and methods that are being developed, for example, remote sensing using satellite imagery, or, for example, extracting data from mobile phones, digital markets where producers and consumers are revealing information about preferences, revealing information about behaviors, our ability to measure the emissions from all the cars on the road or the transportation fleet. There has been a sea change in our ability to do measurement over the last couple of decades. In this phase of addressing the climate problem, where we're rolling out many programs at much larger scales than we have been before, and where we simultaneously have to learn really rapidly. We're moving up the S-curve in terms of our ability to decarbonize the economy. That means rapid learning. That is going to depend on the effectiveness with which we can collaborate between policy and science. What that actually looks like in practice depends on the particular question at hand and the community that's involved. But within my area of research, what this really looks like is partnerships that allow researchers to get involved at the early stages of policy design and implementation, so that we can begin to measure and evaluate the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of that and a variety of different impacts of that policy as it's being rolled out, and provide information that allows policymakers to then potentially refine or test their own ideas or our ideas about how to intervene to make it more effective. So another thing I would say here is that we're still learning how to collaborate effectively between policy making and scientific evaluation. It's challenging. It's challenging because many times Incentives aren't necessarily aligned. Timelines aren't necessarily aligned. Training is not necessarily aligned. These are things that make us complementary in and create strong complementarities in our partnerships, but they also create a lot of behind-the-scenes work to be able to engage effectively in collaboration. So sometimes people ask me about how optimistic I am about, based on the level of understanding that economics has developed as well as other fields in terms of what might work or might not work in achieving emissions reductions at low cost and moving us forward in the energy transition. And what I would say is that there are real reasons for pessimism. There are real reasons for optimism. It's early. We, of course, don't have a ton of time. We don't have the ability to spend 2 more decades waiting around to see what happens. So as I think is true of any other critical problem, it depends on the particular moment and aspect of the challenge that might lead to a moment of pessimism or a moment of optimism. But what I will absolutely say is that from the perspective of somebody who is involved in the science of evaluation, what we have been able to develop over the last 2 decades and the position that we are in now in terms of measurements and evaluation and conducting credible research to understand the direct and broader impacts of climate policy is just stunning. It's absolutely stunning. It gets me up every day, primarily because I care about the problem, but also because it's an area of intense innovation that many of us are extremely excited about. So we have a huge opportunity here. Like many people listening to or watching this, I'm right here and excited to see where this goes tomorrow and next year and over the course of my professional lifetime. We'll all be doing this together.